What's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about Dave Ramsey because Gen Z is not very happy with him. So apparently, there's this crazy trend on TikTok where all these Gen Zers are basically saying, because I'm a millennial. I'm 29 years old. I don't even get on TikTok, so I would never see this stuff. The only way I would even know that this is happening is by seeing an article from Business Insider that says Gen Z says Dave Ramsey's advice doesn't work today. And unfortunately, I got to be honest, I actually agree with Gen Z here. There's very few things in life, period, that I agree with Gen Z about, but I happen to agree with them on this. So let's just go ahead and read a little bit of the article. So it says Gen Z rejects Dave Ramsey's advice to live debt free, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's just go ahead and look at some of the stuff that they said. It says here, you can't buy a house with $50 and a pack of strawberries. Gen Z workers said Ramsey's advice also doesn't cut it when making long-term investments like buying a house. One of Ramsey's top tips for buying a house is to pay for it upfront in cash and avoid taking out a mortgage. Now, I got to be honest, that is terrible advice. That does not work for the average person. It's going to be extremely hard for you to raise enough money to buy a home, especially in this housing market. Case in point, I'm trying to buy a house. And the problem is every home that I'm seeing right now is ridiculously overpriced. And I do not want to significantly overpay for a home. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to get like screwed over or scammed. That's number one. Number two, right now in the current housing market, it's tremendously cheaper to rent right now than it is to buy a house. Normally, that hasn't been the case. Normally, it's actually cheaper to buy a home because, some of these rents are traditionally so high, it's like you're paying a mortgage because of how high some of these rents are. But because of inflation and the high interest rates and whatever else is going on, you're basically paying double for a mortgage than you would for rent. And I'm literally looking at this right now. For some of the homes that I'm looking at, the mortgage that I would have to pay would literally be almost double the price of the rent that I'm paying right now. Actually, it would be double. And in some cases, we're actually getting closer to that triple. That's how crazy things are. But regardless of that, taking out, buying a house in cash, in my opinion, is for rich people. Most people are never going to have the money to completely buy a house in cash. And let's say you get $100,000. Well, depending on where you live, you're not even going to be able to get a decent house. You're going to get a complete dump. And who wants to do that? So I think that's terrible advice. There's nothing wrong with a 30-year mortgage if you can afford it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with paying a mortgage. There's nothing wrong with putting a down payment, having whatever percentage it is, 20% down and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. This whole buying a house in cash thing is absolutely ridiculous. I don't agree with that at all. So I understand where Gen Z is coming from that perspective. It says here, it's mind-boggling that the older generation that bought four-bedroom home for $50 and a pack of strawberries continues to lecture young people on money management. Josh Benson, a 28-year-old from Dallas working in the finance industry, told Business Insider. He's actually right. I got to be honest here. The problem with the older folks is they're so used to how cheap things were in the past and how reasonable things were. They don't understand that life is so different today than it was before. For example, my grandparents did go to college, but let's just take other people's grandparents. I know people whose grandparents did not have a college degree and they were still able to work decent jobs, make decent money, and have enough money to actually buy a home, and they still own their homes to this day. Plenty of people like that from that generation. In today's age, you are not going to be able to do that. It is significantly hard to buy a home. Folks out here got to get bachelor's, master's, doctorate degrees, become a doctor dang near, just to get the money to do it. And so, you have that. But the other piece of Dave Ramsey's advice that I also want to say that I strongly disagree with, and I don't see it in this article, but the other part that I really hate that he says that you should never have credit cards, never ever get a credit card. I really disagree with that. I think it's perfectly fine to have credit cards. Just be responsible. Don't be an idiot. When you get a credit card, understand what you're using it for. For example, for me, my credit score when I got out of college was average. I was like, how do I build my credit score? I went on Google and looked it up. And everything said, get a credit card, use it responsibly, stay under 30%, don't rack up too much debt, pay it on time, blah, 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 all these different things. I got like 2 credit cards and it significantly increased my credit score. And in life, most people are going to need a credit card. So that's another piece of advice that I strongly disagree with Dave Ramsey. I think Dave Ramsey's problem is, if you look at Dave Ramsey's past, he took on a lot of debt through his real estate or whatever he did back in the past when he was younger. He got screwed by it. And I think that scarred him to the point where now he's created an entire brand telling people that debt is bad. And if you take any kind of debt, you're crazy and it's terrible. And I want to be fair here. Dave Ramsey is not the worst thing in the world. I just think that his advice is extremely outdated. I think that with Dave Ramsey, there's nothing wrong with giving advice to people who are just really stupid with their finances. And let's be honest, most Americans, like 90%, are really done with their finances. That's why more than half of Americans can't even afford, don't even have $1,000 in their bank account. They can't even afford a $1,000 emergency expense. And I'm not trying to shame anybody because I understand how hard life is, but it's really not hard to get $1,000 for a emergency fund. It's not hard to build that up if you make the right financial decisions. And I think the problem is a lot of people make really bad financial decisions and they live significantly above their means and they way overspend and their expenses are traditionally higher than what their income is. And it's basically their fault that they do that. Now, in terms of the credit card thing, like I said, I think that the credit cards are good. I think it's a great way to build your credit score, especially if you're young. There's other ways to build your credit score, but I think credit cards are the easiest. Just don't be stupid and spend it all. It's really that simple. And I wish you would preach that. I wish you would preach a more modern, more updated, financial approach to being good with your finances, which is why there are other YouTube channels that I like the Money Guy Show. The Money Guy Show, in my opinion, is a more updated version of Dave Ramsey. I also think Caleb Hammer is also another updated version of Dave Ramsey. I think Dave Ramsey's the old guard. And it really sucks too because Dave Ramsey actually recently hired all these like young people to like be on his show. So he's got this young dude named George and he's got like this black woman on there. He's got like other people that look pretty young. But the problem is they're still preaching this 1960s financial advice, not understanding that the world has changed significantly. Inflation is going through the roof and people are really struggling out here. Now, that does not mean that you can't live a decent financial life and get your stuff together and pay off your debt and, save money and invest. That doesn't mean that you can't do that stuff, but it's not realistic to tell people in the year of 2024 that you should not take a mortgage at all. You should not take any debt to pay your house. And if you're going to buy a house, you should buy it completely in cash. I think that's awful advice because for most people, that's just not realistic. The average person is never going to do that. And you know what's crazy? Life is so hard today. Even if the average person got like 2 or 3 jobs, they still wouldn't have enough money to buy an entire house in cash. Like, that's just ridiculous. I mean, I could just look right now in Chicago where I live. Like, I can't think of any house that you could get that's $100,000 unless you're in like one of the worst neighborhoods of Chicago and who wants to live there. That's the only place I can think of where you could get a house for $100,000. Besides that, in Chicago, there is nowhere here where you can get a home for $100,000. So now you're talking, you're going to have to save what, 160, 170, $200,000? Who the heck is going to do that? That is extremely hard to do. So anyway, I just wanted to give my quick thoughts on Dave Ramsey because Gen Z's kind of fed up with him. And I'm not fed up with him, but I think that his advice is extremely outdated. I think his advice is more so for people who just know absolutely nothing about finance and have made a complete mess of their finances. And he's a great starting point for people like that. And so, you know what? There's one more other thing that Dave Ramsey does that I don't like. He basically preaches that if you're paying off debt, you should tackle the smallest debt first to the highest. I hate that advice too. I think that's terrible. I think you should tackle the debt that has the highest interest, which is something that I actually did in my own personal life. When I paid off the debts that I had, I looked for the debt that had the highest interest rate and I tackled that first. I think that is the smartest way to go because that high interest is going to eat you alive. That is why credit card debt is so dangerous because when you look at things like student loans, the interest rate on that is like 4, 5, 6%. Credit card debt is like 25%. You see how that can really eat you alive and destroy you? So yeah, bottom line is there's a lot that Dave Ramsey says that I don't really agree with. Not really a fan of his advice. Really not a fan of all the little garbage things he sells on his little channel too, but whatever. Anyway, that's today's video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.